Welcome to Wizard Team, a Black magical podcast for Black magical stories.
Hi everyone, it's Bayana and Porshèa embarking on a journey through the many fantasy stories written by and about Black people. Currently, we're reading Amari and the Despicable Wonders by B.B. Alston, and today we're discussing chapters 4 through 6.
Before we get into all of that, let's talk about what happened previously on Wizard Team. So, we started this book with chapters 1 through 3 with a little aspect of like what's going on in the world now that Quentin has awoken and Amari and everyone is on the run. Primarily, that means that Quentin and Amari are going through a situation where Amari is feeling very much like she's being put in a child's place and not being acknowledged for her abilities as part of the magical world. And Quentin seems oblivious as he's running around taking care of responsibilities of keeping them safe while they're on the run. Um, Generally, Amari is not feeling great because she feels like she's failed the world at large and she doesn't have her magic, so that is double sucky. Um, while she's feeling this way, her bestie Elsie and her more than friend, possibly Jaden, are kind of keeping her level headed. And Jaden does that by calling her cute, like a tree. It's a cute moment in the midst of all these very tumultuous things. And another cute factor is they run into a fairy who's been spying on them for the gossip site, and he shares with them that they are public enemies number one, Amari and Elsie, thanks to Harlow's order. And now they have to be very super secretive about how they move. And there's so much going on and people understanding what's happening between the League of Magicians and the supernatural investigations, and also not knowing how awful things are with Harlow, that the team is kind of sent reeling and they are interrupted from thinking too much about how awful things are in the present by the visit of one Mama Peters.
Just quick summary of chapters 4 through 6. So Mama Peters and she arrives, the family has an emotional reunion, but like Porshèa said, everyone's still kind of reeling from the news that Harlow has declared Amari and Elsie enemies of the supernatural world. um and Mama Peters kind of, she doesn't really know what's going on, but she gives them a pep talk, um because they just, they need somebody to tell them that like all is not lost. Um and then of course BB Austin decided that we all need more pain because now it's time for Mama Peters to lose her memories of her children so that she can be protected from the bureau. Once that all happens, Amari is kind of struggling with her lack of magic. She's trying to go to sleep. But she gets that like kind of nauseous feeling that she felt in the bathroom earlier and ends up getting pulled onto or into the League of Magicians meeting grounds. She bumps into a young magician named Lucas who helps her hide, and says that he wants to talk to her after, and kind of mentions that like there are still those within the league who are loyal to her. Um, but Dylan has called all of the magicians there to swear loyalty to him and to also berate them for not standing on business for the last 700 years. He kicks off his new reign by taking all but a drop of Cosmo's magic and then threatening the rest of the league with a similar fate if they don't kind of fall in line. He then spots Amari, and like attacks her, but then she jolts awake because Elsie's like telling her they gotta go because that cute little fairy Columbo didn't hold up his end of the bargain and snitched on them. So now the bureau is on the way. They hop in an Uber of all things to head to their new safe house, but then the bureau is quickly on their tail. So then they end up taking this poor known worlder, this college kid just trying to get a couple bucks, on a high speed chase, that then sends them careening into a brick wall that really ends up being the hidden entrance of a Cyclops run garage for people who are looking to be under the radar, may or may not be doing illegal activity. But he's totally straight now. He's only on the up and up at this point, but he's gonna help them out, and that's where the chapters end.
Gotta love the trajectory of this through the chapter span. We get a little bit of like so many different genres in this little bunch here.
Mhm.
Some of the notes that I brought up for like chapter 4 in particular were um, the Peters family like reunion, like being something that brings up like the whatever emotional guard Amari had for uh,
Mm.
trying to like compartmentalize her emotions from like the things that she needs to do immediately comes down when her mom is like, baby, what's up, what's wrong with you, like how are you doing?
It's such a, like, real thing.
It's very
Like,
relatable.
I can think of a couple times where, like, one of my parents just really looked at me and was like, "What's going on?" And then I immediately burst into tears, like, crazy. It's like that weird, like, parent superpower, but then also I also, like, liked there was, like, a moment, um when they all are hugging and Amari like talks about how she feels like it's like kind of the first time she's felt safe in a while, even though she knows that like technically there's she's not and there's a lot going on. And so I think that that was like maybe the precursor to that moment of her feeling like, okay, finally I'm somewhere where like I'm protected. And then that kind of making her open up at the point that like her mom is like, you good? Um, so yeah, and I think it was super important for her to get that moment too, like, she
Hmm.
can't just be running around acting like, you know,
She got no
Supergirl or
feelings,
whatever.
yeah. Like,
Yeah.
as someone who let's talk about my childhood, let's talk about my present day. As someone who suppressed their emotions while their childhood is a speech and adulthood.
Twins. Woohoo.
Support group, here we are. um, as someone who has suppressed their emotions through this time period, it's very like seeing characters who reflect that. Oh man, I imagine, sometimes I really do imagine what life would be like for me if I had like Amari as a series when I was Amari's age.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
also the level of public understanding of like therapy speak to that extent, like suppressing emotions and this like if I had that level of like guidance at the time,
Mhm.
like what kind of like Shira would I be today? But I think thinking about how Amari is, I feel like she's as honestly it seems like her natural inclination is to suppress her feelings. Um, as we followed her through this like up into this book 3, and you can see all the reasoning she has behind it, right? Like she's like, I'm supposed to like I gotta put my feelings aside in order to find Quentin. I gotta put my feelings aside in
Mhm.
order to figure out how to like wake Quentin up, and then also be a good example of a magician. And then like she's finding like all these reasons to not have to like dig into how she personally feels about the things that she's happening to like run into all the time. And like while she's
Mhm.
thoughtful about it, and she like Elsie doesn't give her any other option but to have to share like from time to time. Um, she's like clearly like in this place where it's comfortable for her. It's more comfortable for her to like kind of put away her feelings in order to feel like she's being productive in some way. And it's like, and I get that so hard. Um, but there's also a level of like emotional productivity that's being overlooked. And so when her mom brings it out of her, um, I like and like you said, like she said, like it's not. She's thinking like I know things are not safe. Like you, and that's how we look at the world. Like we know the world at large is not safe. But then being in a
Mhm.
place that feels, even if it's for a moment, because she's not even in a like location that feels secure. She just it's a secure enough
Right.
moment at the hotel. Um, but just having a moment of safety where you can be vulnerable for just a moment is so hard to come by sometimes. And I think that's something that people
Mhm.
who suppress their emotions are always looking for. It's like, I just need somewhere where I can freely express myself and not feel any level of like guilt or shame or any like negative thing about having that expression. So really, so I find it, when I say very relatable, I mean like very
Yeah.
relatable.
I mean, it's the same as like, I mean, like, or it's like kind of carries over from one of those chapters in the last episode that we talked about where she was like, maybe it was chapter 2, where Elsie was like, "Oh, are you having a panic attack?" And she's like, "I don't have time for that." And it's like, uh, no, maybe not, like, technically speaking, but maybe you should
Your
still,
body's not gonna. You gotta listen to your body.
yeah,
Your
your
body's
body's
not
not gonna
gonna.
know, and it's not gonna care.
Body,
Um,
your body and your brain are
yeah.
gonna be like, hey, so baby, I know you feel like, oh, I'm
We in
your brain.
trouble.
I can control how you move.
Nope. They're like, "We in danger, girl."
Like I was trying to
Yeah.
warn you. Since you didn't want to take my warning,
Mhm.
let's go on and panic out. Like, oh, we're
Mhm.
here. Interesting. So again, um, as a child, she suppressed her emotions and then had anxiety and panic attacks. Yeah, it's only a matter of
Mhm.
time. So glad. I'm so glad that she has a moment where she lets some of it out. Um, and in this moment where it's like it's even in front of her friends, like her, like it's something that like I think her friends, she knows her friends well enough to not be too self-conscious about it, especially in the fact that like
Mhm.
she knows like they understand like her mom coming in and being there is probably the reason why she's allowing herself to have this moment, and they could probably do something similar if they were
Mhm.
feeling as pent up and then they had a trusted adult giving them that moment. So no judgment there. Um, and then to add to this like time, um, so Mama Peters is like, okay, like I need the full story. You can't just burst into tears in front of me and not give me like what's going on. So Amari ends up
Yeah.
sharing everything with her, and Mama Peters is like, okay, well, it sounds like y'all sounding very defeatist, and I need y'all to buck up. Like this is not the time
Mhm.
to drop the ball. This is not the time to look at like all the words
Yeah.
like what was me. Like I don't know nothing about no magic, like I should know
She
more.
said, "I only understood half of what you said, but"
But what I hear with my ear is that you are thinking it's over and it's still going on. So I need you to
Mhm.
blow that off, roll it together, let's figure out some plans. And so like they talk about some plans, and one of the plans is to have to wipe her memory because they know that like she's not, even though she's not magical, she's not part of the world, they're going to come looking for her to for some insights on how to track down her children. So Quentin is like, hey, like I mean the answer is to this is very clear to me, we're going to wipe your memory. And Amari's immediately repelled from that thought, um,
Mhm.
and tries to like safeguard her mother, but her mother's like, baby girl, that's not your decision, it's my decision, and my decision is to do
Mhm.
this.
And I think not only is it not her decision, I feel like it's also the, like, she's the adult in the situation, and if that is the best way that she could protect her kids, then, like, it also feels like not really much of a decision for her, where she's just like, "Yeah, of course I'm gonna do this."
Yeah. um and Amari is like just like distraught by this, and like Elsie tries to tell her like, hey, it's not permanent, but she's like, girl, you better sit down, I'm talking about my mama. And uh but like seeing her mom's resolve about it all like does give Amari a level of boosting up, like, well, if my mom can do this, then I can think about like sacrificing a little bit differently, right? And
Mhm.
uh, Quentin is very like, you can tell that it does strike Quentin as he's doing it, like this is a guy erasing his mother's memory of himself and his sister.
Mhm.
He chokes up when he's like telling her, addressing her as if she's just another woman, to
Mhm.
forget both of her children, and that she suddenly got a desire to go visit her friend who has been asking her to come out for a while. So yay for Mom Peter's getting a much needed vacation. I also don't think we've ever heard of this lady not being at work.
Right,
But
true.
at the same time, uh, like it's a very like traumatic kind of like experience, right? To like know that
Mhm.
your mom is alive and has no memory of you at all. And so
Mhm.
um we close off chapter 4 with like Amari sitting in that feeling, even having the urge to call her mama and calling her that, and that her mom looks at her and it's like, oh, I don't know who your mom is, but like I hope you find her. And it's just like sad, right? Um, but I do feel good about the fact that like it's like the wage of that price is really what like Mama Peters is showing is that no matter what, um, it is worth the sacrifice of hopefully a short term drawback or whatever to if the greater good is going to be served. And for
Mm-hmm.
her greater good is going to always be her children. And so I think that in some ways Amari is like on board with what her mom is like showing is the way to move forward so you like move ahead, but this in some ways Amari is still kind of like stricken by how emotional this choice was and the fact that they're in this place where this level of choice has to be made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. I feel like I think also like that chapter when I was reading it the first time was when I was kind of like, oh, okay, we're just gonna be like emotionally we're gonna be taken through it emotionally.
Emotional roller coaster ride. Yeah.
Fun's over, guys. Like we're this is about to be serious business. And again, like we talked about it, I think at the end of last episode, just like the balance that BB Austin strikes between like the emotions and the like whimsy and the there's a lot going on, and it still feels very much like for kids and like still grounded in that. So that's nice. And like even like the next couple chapters are in some ways fun, but also like there's still that like emotional like resonance, which is cool, even if it's a little heartbreaking. Wizard Team is part of the Black Nerds Create Collective, which provides content through the lens of critical and creative fandom. In BNC's Discord, you can not only find a channel dedicated to all things Wizard Team, but spaces to connect with other fellow nerds about stories across media, genre, and more. Join a group read, find book recommendations, and maybe even get the juice to write your own story. Just go to bnc-community.com to join. So chapter 5. So really I think the kind of biggest thing that stood out to me about this chapter is that like I think Amari um especially just in the last few chapters has like she's been thinking a lot about how she's like quote unquote failed and how um she lost the League of Magicians um and all of that, but like when she ends up in the meeting accidentally, like she learns very quickly that the league is still split, right? Like when they first did their first meeting right before the great game, like it was very much split on like we want to use foul magic, we want to take back our power, we want to follow Dylan, and we want to continue to lay low, use fair magic, maybe work with the bureau. Like those are still two factions. It didn't just all of a sudden like they didn't all turn in favor of Dylan right away just because he won the great game. Um and so I think that like kind of establishment of like no, you still have some like people who are rocking with you and who like want to support you as if and how they can. Um I think was kind of important to kind of like establish in that moment. And so, or I guess early on. And so, yeah, just kind of like the reminder that like, okay, there are magicians here who, even if they're not like loyal to Amari, at least agree with her and would want to follow her as opposed to those who want to follow Dylan. Um, so yeah, so it's like, and it's the same as the bureau. It's like magicians and the bureau are fighting each other, but none of them are really like united within themselves either, which kind of allows for more chaos as well.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because I feel like there's there's just so many things going on here. I think one of the things, like, well, I guess when we'll probably get into it. Let's talk more about like what Dylan says, but
Mhm.
there's a level of like them agreeing to what Dylan says. And the thing that caught me was that like Dylan taking ownership over magical beings and creatures and being like they're like they are basically like um rejecting or like persecuting the unwanteds that the magicians created. And I'm like, you can't take like um I guess like creative control or like response like you like magician kind created a whole species of like magical beings like or like all of these different kinds like he says like unwanted generally. I'm like, there's so many
Mhm.
different like beings that are under the like the moniker of unwanted that it sounds ridiculous and it's like you're making yourself sound like a god. And there's people who and are
Yeah.
in the crowd who are like clapping along to this like mindset, whereas like others are kind of like turned to like turned off and repelled. And yet y'all, the repelled folks, aren't sticking up enough to keep this kind of mindset from being
Mm-mm.
part of the league. So it's like, does it really matter if Amari has like any level of alliance there if like you're not gonna be sticking up for the
If you're not willing to speak, yeah.
you weren't willing to speak up before this was a big deal, you know?
Right, and I think, like, as we see too, it's like they're scared, and I think especially because I mean, obviously, like, Amari had her, um, magic taken, but, like, I think for the others, it's easier for that to happen because they're not born magicians, which I'm not as an excuse, but what I'm like, I think there's also a level of just, like, I won't yeah, like, lack of courage, or just, like, not, because 'cause I'm sure there are also people who don't really care either way
Mhm.
too, so it's just, like, not really having, like not really being organized in that way, and to Dylan's point, they had 700 years to
Mhm.
figure this out, either way, and they
And I
didn't, they just kinda been sitting around.
and it feels like a cop out to me that like there's 700 years and so many more not born magicians than there are of born magicians, but you're waiting for a born magician to show up and take care of everything.
Mhm.
And like at some level
Mhm.
I get the fear of like if you organize then you become a target for the born magician who's over OP in comparison to you and will take you out
Mhm.
because you're like a leader and they're trying to establish like I get that. But like some like people give people a hard time of trying to get rid of what you've already arranged. Like make it hard for
Mhm.
them to like come up against an infrastructure. Like a system is harder to fight when it's a system than whenever it's a disorganized group of folks.
Yeah. And also, like, to on top of this, like and I understand it for narrative and, like, book age purposes, but, like, these are children. Like, as in Amari and Dylan are children. You're waiting on the children to lead. Most of these magicians are adults. The person who helps Amari yeah, it's like the person who helps Amari is another kid who's like, "Oh, we're on your side." But how long has he been a magician? Like a year or 2? You know what I mean? Like he's an apprentice. So it's just like, what were y'all doing like this whole time? Um, yeah, it's an interesting thing. Um, but yeah, and I guess okay, I want to go into what Dylan said before I go into the other thing. I feel like because it tone wise will will transition better.
Mhm.
But he has this quote that um he says the only cure for fear is power and power is best sustained through fear. Um and I just feel like reading it this I could, because we're reading it slower or whatever, like this was such a succinct kind of I guess summary in a way of like who Dylan is.
Mhm.
And, like, what he's come to learn in his, like, 13 years of life, right? And
Mhm.
it's like you think about the people who have been his role models and like caretakers, and it's like his dad,
His mother.
Moreau, his mother, like Maria to an extent, but like, so it's just like it's an interesting thing and like kind of scary that it's like this is what this 13-year-old believes so deeply, and that is kind of like it also kind of like in a way it's like he's kind of admitting that he's afraid or has been afraid
Mhm.
and has had to like and his only kind of way to get over that or get through that is to gain power, and now he's like, "Cool, now I'm gonna use that to make other people afraid." It's just like and again, like, it's very clear, like, he's been doing that for the last couple books, but, like,
Mhm.
I just felt like it was the most kind of, like, clear and, like, succinct, and kinda, like, pointed in that kind of, like, sentence.
Not to be that girl, but we know that I'm that girl. Um,
Yeah.
the thing of like for me, like as you're saying it, what stands out to me is how normal this is to occur with like people who have been socialized to like behave patriarchally, like with like a
Mhm.
masculine presentation of some sort, because
Mhm.
this thought of like their coping mechanism to get through something that is internal, like a internal fear, is to take it out on others rather than seek
Right.
internal like fixing
Mhm.
and like adjusting and all that. So like he's scared, and like not only is he modeled through like this like patriarchal kind of like point of view of like the how the burrow works and his like his family and how they work, but also like in his brain like that's the right way to do things because it's like it also
Mhm.
serves him to feel like he's the center of the power, and that's what he wants to embody. And it just like all the history of the world, all the history of
Mhm.
like the supernatural world, and that's the lesson that she learned. And I think that like to me his whole crusade for the magicians and like seeing Moreau as someone who should be like on a pedestal in some places, but then also like, oh, he got old and that's whenever he got stupid kind of thing. Like it's
Right.
again, it's very like adhering to that like idea of the patriarchy and like how it functions and all those things.
Mhm.
Um and masculinity and how that functions. Like whenever you're no longer strong, like you're not physically or whatever strong, then that's whenever you're not supposed to be you're not supposed to be there anymore.
Mhm.
And I like when I think about that, I'm like, that's something that it's very self-serving. Like you're making up your mind to
Absolutely.
evolve this way in order to serve your own purposes. And it's because you don't
Mhm.
have like, yes, the argument could be that he didn't have any other option modeled to him, but I don't think that's true. And I think that it's like a choice. It's like you like him interacting with Amari, especially in the first book. Um, like clearly showed how he kept making the choice to go back
Mhm.
towards the ideology that he like already had built up in his head to serve his own thoughts than it was to like actually take the challenging to that mindset that Amari brought to him seriously and be like, well, maybe I shouldn't do this. He's like, well, I'm already on the road and I
Right.
want to consume the powers. Actually, this I'm not going to change my mind at all. I actually
Mhm.
want to try to pull her
Yeah.
into that thing because it makes sense.
Yeah. He's always had this, like, kind of narrative about himself and about the world that he doesn't really want challenged or isn't, like, looking to be challenged. He's just looking for things that, confirm or, like, reinforce what he already thinks. Um, and then, like, then he can blame others or kind of, shift blame and stuff like that, and accountability,
Yeah,
escape
it's never him.
accountability for what
It's
he's
never his
doing.
problem.
It's never his problem, and it's like but he yeah, but it's all of what you said. It's just like yeah, just the ways that, like, in our society that people both, like, revere power, but also the ways that they take it,
But also
and
like power means different things to different people, right? Like I feel like the
right.
reverence for power that is like because this is very specific. So this component too is that like he says that, and I did not think like this one thought out of this whole like villain splain of like his mind, his ideology,
Mhm.
and like how he's feeling. The one line that I agreed with, which question mark, why did I agree with this?
Right.
Is that sometimes a monster is required. Like, yes, that is correct. Sometimes,
Mm.
like, there is a monster required. However, what he's looking at, what a monster being required versus like when a monster, I feel like a monster is actually required, are two different ways of understanding it. And
Mhm.
he's looking at us, and it's funny because I think the through line is that like he's seeing himself as a martyr for the greater good of magicians being able
Mhm.
to like live freely and be themselves, but he wants them to live freely and be themselves in a way that they're imposing power on others.
Right.
They're the most strong, powerful beings of all time, so you have to bow
Mhm.
down and be subjugated under our power. Versus I see I see monsterdom as something that is like, in order for society to function in a way that is thoughtful to the needs of everyone in society, like the boundaries of what is and isn't acceptable has to be like has to be an example of what those things are.
Mhm.
And so it is necessary that monsters exist so people understand this is and what is not acceptable when it comes to
Right.
our like social contract of like how we like interact with each other. I also think that sometimes like of being a villain it can be necessary because sometimes you're just gonna be a villain in someone else's life. Like
Mhm.
they want their life, they want you to interact in their life in a certain way and you're not moving that way because that's not who you are, but they refuse to see that.
Mhm.
They want to see you as inhabiting a certain role in their lives. So when you do the opposite of that, you become their villain because you're not
Mhm.
being the person. um
Yeah.
so there's like layers into that, like where it's like I can understand why people get gripped into some aspects of things that actually make sense. But then when you see the other factors aligned with it, it's like, but why? Like, and
Right.
I think there's something to this that reminds me of like how people like talking about the current political environment, where people very much were in the place where they derived a level of satisfaction from knowing that they were making someone else's life bad. And that's what
Mhm.
power means. It's having the ability to make decisions that changes someone's life for, and
Mhm.
the fact that they're trying to choose someone else's life for the worse is what's
Right.
like that's a very
Like what's
sad, miserable place to be.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's like you could be doing so many other things. It's like I think one thing I just can't really stand is when people like I feel like, everybody's kind of experiences and kind of like who they become after that. I will really everyone's experiences are valid and like their traumas and their like struggles and their whatever. Like yes, their emotions, their feelings. But then when you like make that someone else's problem, especially on a like systemic or global or like scale and for the worst, like no. Like immediately I'm done, like I can't, because you should be able to, again, it's like doing that internal work. Like yeah, you should have community and people who can kind of help you through it and work through it, but it can't be a thing where you're lashing out. It can't be a thing where you're now like so like obsessed with power and obsessed with like ruling over other people and forcing them to kind of like have to interact with you or have to address you or have to like, whatever. um yeah, it just
Yeah, I feel like
it's a no from me.
for too many people, the word power equals domination. And to me,
Mhm.
that shows how much people like whenever people call people snowflakes and sheep, to me, it's like you're looking at the ability to listen and understand and adapt, which are very soft skills. You're looking at any level of softness as a weakness. And that is your like complete misunderstanding of the duality of like nature and being able to like you can't just have hard all the time. You can't have just strong all the time.
Mhm.
That's not going to serve anyone to have just one. element of a thing, and yet in their heads, domination equals power, and so any level of vulnerability or submission, therefore, is something that has to be eradicated or like put into like persecution and like all this stuff. So it's like it's so frustrating. And
Yeah.
like to hear the league members just like there's a large group of them who are applauding this, and then not enough people who are actively like saying nay, for good
Right.
reasons, right? Because we do see an example why like why they might want to keep
Why
the
they
house
say
quiet. Yeah,
keep it
like
cute.
like when I'm in there, I don't be talking. Whenever I leave, I be talking. You know,
I be talking
I be
literally.
talking.
Literally. I be talking again. The next part was like serious talk. Now, okay, so Dylan has his whole speech, whatever. He's, talking about all the power and he's taking over, and now the old guard is out. And so he demonstrates this by taking Cosmo's magic, all but a drop of Cosmo's magic. And I just feel like that's what he gets. You hate to see it. Like,
That's what you get when you let your hate win.
mm-hmm.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. Literally. Cause if you play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Like
Like, don't you feel foolish? Do you feel ashamed?
come on. Are you not embarrassed? Like what is
Are you not?
like wow. Wow. All the
And like, while
things.
we're on embarrassment, not Cosmo, but like to like this, like and seeing myself in Amari, this is embarrassing to me. When Amari first shows up in the stadium and slips and falls on her face, and is like looking around to see if anyone else like caught her. She's
Oh,
like, I
saw
like
that she
saw that she fell. And then it's like, okay, that's embarrassing enough to just like have that happen. But she's like in public enemy number one. So it's like trying to make sure you're like incognito while having an embarrassing moment. Like it's just like the
mm-hmm.
double layers to that was so funny to me, but also like imagine you have an embarrassing moment when you're also trying to be like not seen by anyone.
On the low. Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine falling down a thing of stairs and like no one's supposed to know you're there. Like
Mm-hmm.
what do you do at that point?
Mm-hmm. Like how do you come back from that?
Exact. And I just feel like the embarrassing moments in this chapter. I'm just like, whoa, like Cosmo. Cosmo deserves an
He
embarrassing
did so
moment. Amari, I'm like,
much.
baby girl,
Yeah.
for
Poor
so
kid.
little, for one
Cosmo got
drop.
karma though. I was like, that's
Yeah,
that's what
he did
happens
all
when
that for
you
one
like
drop.
you put and then he was like, but I helped you escape and I helped you dupe and Dylan's like, that's why I'm not killing you. That's why I didn't take all of your magic. But it's like, yeah, I don't know why you thought like that was the route.
I just think that it's whatever. That's like to me, it's like okay, and next, and I feel like for me, and
Mhm.
again, this just very much it's very much why people never win by trying to ingratiate themselves with someone who has like dictatorial like tendencies.
Mhm.
Um
Mhm. Cuz
and
they're fickle. Like it's really all about them and their power. They're not really worried about
and
you.
they get very paranoid very easily. It don't take much to set
Mhm.
them off. So like you're really
Mhm.
playing a short-term game trying to cozy up with
Mhm.
someone like that. And so with like again, the people who are supportive of Dylan's like platform, how long do you think you're going to actually last? Like it's only again, it's only a
Right.
matter of time. It don't. He's saying all these words will like make sure y'all. Um, if I hear about any dissent, like no, you're going to be next. But it's like it's only a matter of time before like if you make it like a red scare situation, like people are informing on each other and blah blah blah. It's only a matter of time
Mhm.
before you're in the crosshairs. You can be doing your
Right.
utmost best to adhere to whatever the new guidelines are. And there's always gonna be new guidelines because they're always paranoid.
Mhm.
So like that's why I'm like, that's why being a former student of history, because I'm not as like on top of it as I used to be, like it really blows my mind every time like events start moving in a way that it's like we have precedent and models for
Right.
how this is
We've seen
slippery
this
slope
before.
into this so many
Mhm.
times.
Mhm. Yep.
But you
Absolutely.
made your bed and now you lie in it, much like Cosmo.
Very much like Cosmo. Cool. The only other thing I wanted to bring up is so they're in their Uber and Jaden notices that um a lot of supernatural folks are now fleeing Atlanta. And so it's just like this kind of note that like there are just, regular supernatural people. They're not all part of the bureau. And so they're just kind of seeing things are starting to bubble up. The bureau was set on fire, like all these kinds of things. They're just like, all right, gotta go, gotta blast. So yeah.
But it also feels very politically poignant, like in this current moment, because it's like deportation and like people who
Mhm.
are like choosing to leave
Mhm.
before it becomes a part of problem for them. And like they know that they're
Mhm.
again, Elsie and Amari are the targets right now by Harlow. They know the magicians are like, like who knows who put a handle on that. The Bureau's only had so relationship with people, and like a good amount of people are like categorized as unwanted. So
Mhm.
like who's gonna take the chance to stick around and see how things play out for them when they're on the
Mhm.
like margins already? So it just
Right.
makes so much sense.
Exactly.
Um, so, and again, I think especially poignant in this political moment, I was like, oh man, like reading this right now, knowing what's happening right now, like, oh, yeah.
Wild. Yeah.
My only other note for this chapter was that I'm trying to understand what's happening with Amari because initially, like the first time we see her kind of like go into this like place where Dylan is, um, in the past episode, like it felt like maybe it's just astral projection.
Mhm.
Her spirit is where this is happening, but not her body. But she
Mhm.
falls physically and feels the pain,
Mhm.
and like is able to have someone else's cloak put on top of her. So her physical body is present
I wondered
at the freaking
if
league.
I mean, yeah, I'm not quite sure how the magic works, but I did wonder if it was like they were all in this like it wasn't quite a dreamscape, but something like that. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
not that
Like a
she
metaverse.
yeah, or something like that. Like not like she didn't like physically cuz Elsie was able to like wake her up. So
But that's what
like in my
confuses
head I'm
me.
like maybe they're all asleep, but at the same time, you know what I mean? I don't know.
But like when you're
That was
in a
my guess.
dreamscape,
I'm not
you can't feel things. You can't interact. Like things don't touch
right.
you.
But maybe in the I don't know. It's magic. I don't know.
So like suffice to say, the girly is confused about the magic at work here. Is it like it can't be
Yeah.
astral projection? Like I can rule that one out, but I don't know what it actually
Mhm.
is.
Mhm.
And like because Elsie's able to wake her up, that means that like at no point was anyone concerned that she like teleported away.
Right, right. Yeah, she didn't disappear.
And Amari even thinks like I'm not at the dream like section. I forget what that's called. The dream
I
wakeful
think is
dream
it not
or the dream theater.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
She's
Mhm.
like she's not inside of a dream theater and she's not even wearing wakeful dream shades. So like how does this like I'm with Amari here. What is this? What's happening?
Yeah. And I wonder if it's, like, just a way that, like, magicians meet or if it is something to do with, like, Dylan's heightened power, you know what I mean? Like, that he's
The
able to
crown,
do
maybe?
that. Yeah. But I don't know, but he also doesn't quite seem to know how it works because he didn't think that like, Amari wasn't supposed to be able to
Bounce.
or even be pulled into it because it's not like she came on purpose.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, he didn't have oversight.
so
He says he's like maybe you're part of the league. I called all the league and like you're under like the. clause for
You
that.
know, she's still
So
on the mailing list.
yeah, all I know is that there are questions, and I want them answered, and maybe we will have
Mhm.
them at some point.
Yeah,
Um,
that's real.
chapter 6. Um, so this is wherein we go on a high speed, Fast and the Furious like chase. In this Uber car. I really feel for this driver
I
because
feel so
imagine
bad.
you're imagine you're just like trying to make some change during college break
Mhm.
and you're working as like doing that as a freaking like rideshare driver and all of a sudden you go from being like routine pickup on the way to another stop to oh I'm in the set of an action movie.
Right. I would be so confused, especially the fact that there's like 3 kids in the back seat.
Right, like what action
You
movie are you
got
supposed to keep on a high speed car chase
dude took over your car.
with a laptop?
You're trying to with the laptop. You got black trucks, black SUVs speeding after you.
Blasting stuff at you,
Sorry to
telling
him.
you to pull over.
Mhm.
I just the most
So sorry
empathy
to him.
for this driver. So sorry for this
Yeah.
man. The other thing I wanted to pull up was that like and the thing I did enjoy about the chase was that like there's so many things I think BB Austin is able to pull from popular culture into the series that feels very fun. And it's not like it's like one to one comparisons. It's just that it's like
Mhm.
you can feel the beats of it. And I think that it
Yeah.
helps like kids like focus in on the story that they can have like if they have like an image in their head that they're working with as they're reading the story.
Right. Like a
And
frame of
so
reference.
yeah, so when Amari starts steering the car using a laptop while Quentin blasts electromagnetic energy towards the agents that are coming after them, it feels very Shuri and T'Challa during Black Panther 1 whenever they're in like
Mm.
he's in Korea and she's driving the car for him as he's like wearing the suit and like using the like charged up kinetic energy to like blast it on people. I'm
Mhm.
like I can see this, and it's like, and his brother and
Yeah.
sister, and it's Amari having a moment where she's showing us how she can be useful, like on the in the action just as much as like her brother can be.
Mhm. Yeah, agreed. And it's like and the tension is really, it's raised. You're like, are they gonna make it type like it's a whole yeah. It's a fun scene even though it's a little stressful.
Yeah, I mean a lot stressful, especially if you're the
Yeah, a
right.
lot stressful. And the fact that like I like again, Amari still hasn't really been able to process what happened with Dylan. Like she woke up, they had to go, and now they're in a high speed chase.
It be like that sometimes if your life is that of Amari Peters, I suppose.
Mhm.
Um, so I thought it was funny. Like it was, maybe this is just something she's saying, but it feels real to me. But after um that heart starving chase, her saying that like I retire from being a hero after all this is over. I'm
Yo.
not the girl's going on a break, so get somebody else to do it. I'm out. If this is where the monarchy is headed, count me out, basically. Um, and I think it makes sense though, and the abstract is like she's basically achieved her goal. Like her goal was to
Yeah.
find and revive Quentin. Once like she found him, she it was revived. So like generally, she's got what she's wanted. So she could retire happy as soon as her name's cleared and she's no longer like
Mhm.
being hunted down. It makes so much
Yeah,
sense.
it definitely felt like I know in some ways like it was kind of a joke, but it was definitely foreshadowing.
Mm-hmm.
Um and like when she actually does make a similar decision, it's a little less like it's a little sadder or a little less like
Mm-hmm.
chaotic, but also like you said, like felt cuz I would not need all of that excitement all the time. Sometimes you're just not built
Like
for it.
heart stopping. Like the car was on two wheels at some point. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
don't. This is not the life
Mm-mm.
for me.
No, thank you.
That's why I wouldn't have been
It's
an
so
agent in the
good.
first place. I'm sure if Robyn were here, like that would be the same sentiment. Like, no, this is,
Mhm.
this is not what I wanted to do. Like, but unfortunately, you did sign up for it by being an agent. I just personally
Right.
would not have signed up for it in the first place because none of that appeals to
Right.
me.
Nope. It's a no for me.
No, you would find me in the records. You would find me in the dream hall.
Mhm.
I'm not over there. I'm
Nope.
nope. And my final note for chapter 6, um, it's just my appreciation. We don't get. I don't think we get the Cyclops' name in this chapter. But I've expressed my interest in criminal enterprises within the world of the supernatural affairs investigations. um, well, the Bureau of Investigation. No, the Supernatural
Mhm.
Bureau, whatever. And so it's funny seeing a character being like a reformed quote unquote criminal,
Mhm.
and trying to explain his work in like terms that make it sound like he's not up to criminal activity. It's like, sir, and like the whole time Quinn's just like, come on, like it's cool. Like I'm telling you right now, like this is something that I counted on. Like
Right.
as someone who could be taking you in handcuffs right now, I'm actually relying on you being who you are. This is actually helpful to me. So you do not be concerned about like this is not going to come up. I'm not going to be pressing charges. In fact, I will be
Mhm.
implicating myself by taking like some of your services. Um, and so I don't think that the Cyclops actually embraces that until like the end of the chapter. He's like, whatever, come on. And I just loved
Yeah.
like back and forth banter of like, no, like totally upstanding, totally like I just kind of this
Yeah.
happened
You know,
and have
I
this
don't do that anymore.
right,
I got kids to feed, you know? I'm like, I'm on the up and up. And
you
they're like,
know.
"Bro, we
This
just
is just like
ran
a
into your secret entrance. Clearly, we're up to
clearly.
something."
And Quinn's like,
And we would like your assistance in being
yeah,
up to
Quinn's like,
something.
clearly you still have it up for a reason, and like again, it helped me. So we're on the same page, bro. Like, let's not fiddle
Mhm.
around. It's not that big a deal. Actually, I'm very happy with this.
Yeah.
And I just like as someone who has been looking forward to criminal enterprises within this world, I'm happy to hear of a new, like another aspect of it. I had not thought about it before. He had like a flying saucer like up in there. Um,
Mhm.
but also I'm super excited. Like I'm like maybe this does mean that whenever I made the note, we had a discussion like on the live stream with BB Alston about the Sasquatch Mafia, like, and he was like,
Mhm.
that could happen. I'm like, yes,
I'm like, it's there. There's definitely the underbelly of the
yes,
supernatural world. And
yes,
we've only gotten hints of it. We haven't quite gotten like all the way there. Um, but yeah, no, it's definitely just I think I appreciate a lot like we get to see so much of this world and like so many kinds of different kinds of people and characters and stuff and like, you know, a lot of them are in some ways familiar to like real life, but um they all feel it just makes the world feel so much more kind of like built out. Um, so yeah, so it's like it's nice. And again, poor Uber driver seeing a cyclops for the first time. He just straight up fainted. So so sorry to him.
I know. And I love what the psychosis was like, oh, my bad. If I would have known you would have had one of them with you, I would have had to stick my other eye in. I was like, the prosthetic
Right.
in. I'm like, that's hilarious.
He said, "That's on me.
He's
My
like, I'm trying to
fault."
be accommodating. That's my bad.
It's like, now you're gonna have to
Uh,
wipe his memory and stuff. That's you know, it's okay. He
it's all
needed
right.
his memory wiped anyway.
Right.
He was already due for a memory wipe because what do you do with any of what just happened?
Right. And there's no way that, like, Quentin's going to send him back out in the world to be picked up by the
The
Bureau
bureau.
and,
Yeah.
like, him having actual things that could, like, like, not only that could implicate, like, what's happening with Quentin and the crew, but also like that could somehow like put that guy in trouble.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. But wow, what a world. um okay. So who is your MVP?
I MVP'd Mama Peters for being the stand up pep talk person. I did not know that they needed, but she did that, and she like not only gave the talk, but she walked the walk. So I was down for that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I also MVP'd Quentin because, and I don't have Robyn here to to counter me on this. I'm sure she will. Um, is that like I appreciated that. Like I'm like for all the times that Amari is feeling like she's like Quentin is not taking her seriously, he thought nothing of having her like run the laptop. He wasn't like hesitant. He wasn't like, oh, maybe like the
Mm.
driver who knows who this is his car. He's the adult. He should like he was just like, oh yeah, like take control, like do what you need to do, whatever. So I understand like, and that's the thing about having negative emotions are going to try to like mostly win over positive ones. You're going to see the negative acts before you kind of like weigh in the positive ones. So I can
Yeah.
see how Amari has moments where she's like, oh, he doesn't take me seriously. He does not take, he's not like allowing me to do things that I know I can do. But like, I feel like he has moments where he's clearly showing her trust and doing things that like are not
Mm-hmm.
like something that he would allow like a 5-year-old to do. Um,
Right.
and I feel like that's intentional. I don't think
Yeah, and I think to your point too, like in the when their mom asks like what's going on, like he looks to her and kind of like lets her lead that conversation because
Mhm.
he's literally he just woke up. Like
Right.
and he's kind of acknowledging the fact that like Amari has been driving this
Journey.
train,
Yeah.
this journey this whole time. Like he does have that kind of moment of being like, okay, like this is, this is you. It's not I don't have to completely take on this whole thing.
So big
Um
ups,
so
big
yeah,
ups to the big brother, is what I'm saying.
that's real. That's very real. I ended up just MVPing Mama Peters for really like the reasons you said, and just like yeah, I just think they needed like sometimes you just need a moment. Sometimes you just need your mom, you know? And so like she like being able to have that moment even though like at the end of the day like she had her memory wiped and kind of had to go, but like allowing and also just like allowing for that reunion of like her getting to like see her son awake for the first time in whoever know like what is it like 2 years, something crazy.
Mhm.
So yeah, so all of those things. Um but yeah, and really just like the pep talk and kind of giving them like a okay y'all, I don't know what you just said. I've only got like a couple of them things. I know I'm not really
Go
in your
here.
world. However,
Mhm.
it do sound to me like you're giving up, and I know that is not something that I taught my kids to do. So, buck up, y'all got this. Like I appreciate that.
Like, what did Aaliyah say? At first you don't succeed, get up and
Right,
try.
exactly. And then benched.
I I could not bench Dylan without also benching the reason for the season, which is his father, director Van
Uh-huh.
Helsing.
Real. Got to get in as many as you can.
I got to get nah
Yeah.
because Dylan is only able to be who he is because his
Mhm.
father is the
Mhm.
bigot and prat that he is.
Mhm.
If his
Mhm.
father were any other kind of man, Dylan would not be as freaking troubled of a child as he is. I put
Yeah.
that on director Van Helsing. His mother has some
Yeah.
degrees to do with it, and I see her, but that man, direct him,
Mhm.
absolutely,
Yeah.
he should not be allowed around children. Whatever counseling is given at the end of all this, it should restrict his ability to be near children. I really
Mhm.
sincerely mean that. Like, please.
Mhm.
Um, and Dylan, look, child,
Get some help.
clearly you've never learned the lesson of don't take other people's things. Clearly you've never learned the lesson of being at all thoughtful to like pride goeth before a fall. that like
Mhm.
it's like a heavy head wears like you've never actually internalized like how ridiculous this goal that you set for yourself is. And
Mhm.
I there's nothing to me, as much as I could again, and I really do blame the adults in his life for how he is. You also have made very specific choices to only listen to those negative voices like Moreau and um in light of all the other things you know about the world. And like just because the idea of dominating and subjugating an entire world because you're powerful just is so messed up. Um,
Mhm.
and I know that can't come out of nowhere. So again, I keep blaming the adults. I would also add Rose to this list. Um, but like the fact that Dylan is embodying it in his little 13-year-old's body and like clearly it's doing things to him that he's not like even fully processing. Like who's processing that? Like you have red
Mhm.
eyes, you have like weird magic coming out of your hands that you're just like, look at this, guys,
Mhm.
and it's like, no, this is weird. It's just there's a lot of stuff happening there, and I'm sure like if we were seeing this story from his perspective, it would be a horror because like
Yeah.
whatever is going on in there cannot be, especially after being in the
He's
sightless depths. Like this would be a sure horror genre,
just a
um, and
traumatized kid. Mhm.
with horrors just living in his brain. And he's
Mhm.
over here messing with other people's dreams because his dreams are probably all nightmares. So
Yeah. Yeah.
as much as I'm bitching Dylan, I'm bitching every adult that's failed him along the way. Like when I say Dylan,
Yeah.
I mean every adult that goes with
All
that.
the Mhm. And, like, I agree, like, I going off that kinda goes into, like, why I did binge Dylan,
Mm-hmm.
but why I binged Cosmo,
Mm-hmm.
um, partially because like, again, that's what you get for this for this chapter of him losing his magic, but also, like, if you think about, like, the end of Great Game, like, Amari was taking that trauma away,
Mm-hmm.
and Cosmo, like, forced her to put all that back in him,
Mm-hmm.
for his own ends, like, for, like,
For
what he
Cosmos
wanted
own
the
ends.
magicians like,
Yes.
yeah, for Cosmo's own end, for to steer the League of Magicians in the way that Cosmo wanted it to go. He basically allowed Dylan to, like, fully be like, subsumed by his trauma and, like, all this his issues with the Silent Depths, his father, like, all of those things, like, Amari was literally like, her kind of solution to the problem was to help him, and Cosmo was like, "Nah."
Mm-hmm.
So,
He
like,
don't want to be
again, like,
saved. Don't save
so
him.
right, and it's just like, I don't want him to be saved. Like, if he's saved, then
Right.
we can't go in the way that I'm trying to, like, you know, push the
Maneuver.
league.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that was like my addition, like, to what you were saying about Dylan. Like, definitely benched because, like, bro, you are on 100,
50,000.
and I need you at like a 10. But there are so many adults in the situation who have failed him, um, or who have manipulated him into
Mm-hmm.
becoming this way. And Cosmo is definitely one of those. So he can have a seat.
And I think your comment like also like it also highlights the role of grooming. Like Cosmo
Mhm.
would not have been able to be effective if the initial like grooming steps of like his father, his family, Moreau. Like Moreau would not have been
Mhm.
able to have a foothold if his family hadn't been the way they did. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, absolutely.
so I just,
It's like one of those things, which I appreciate. I think that, like, because these are children, like, like in this case, like, obviously, like, Harlow is an adult and she's a villain, and, like, there are other adult, like, villains. And I think in the other, like, middle grade, there are adult villains. I do appreciate that, like, this book gives you a child who is, like, the big bad in a sense. Um, and it makes you like you feel for him in a way that I think that like sometimes like people try to make villains redeemable and it's kind of like why or there are specific kind of like agendas attached to that, but I think in this case like there's this, we've
Mhm.
brought it up again and again like in reading the series of just like the radicalization of children and especially like white boys, and how that happens and
Mhm.
like all of the failures that like lead to that happening. And I think that like BB Austin does a really good job of showing that. And so you on the
Mhm.
one hand are like, no, Dylan's tripping and like, yeah, he needs to be defeated and like all of these things. But at the same time, like he adds these like moments of empathy where you're like remembering or like reminded, like, no, this is he's 13.
Yeah.
He ain't been around that long. Right. Like there it's not, and not to say that he can't be accountable for his actions or that he's not making like conscious decisions, but like
Mhm.
the whole way that his thought processes and like his mind is like warped, like that's gonna take a lot of unlearning for him to like become a like
A
you
decent
know
person. Not even a good person, just a
yeah, but
decent
like
person.
right, but it's like, and it's not his fault that he ended up this way. And like yeah, so there's just all these people who were involved in making him this way, and then they're putting him in charge.
That was my
Like
next thought. Like my next comment was that like they chose him like purposely chose like Van Helsing purposely chose to guide his children in this way to be bigoted, because that's what he wanted his children to embody.
mhm
Moreau wanted to take advantage of this child and his magical abilities in order to see what world he wanted to see be guided and shaped through the next generation because he wanted to make sure that it would happen.
mhm
Cosmo decided to like take on like all of these are knowing adults, knowing what they're. This is not like they're like, oh, I just happened to like, I said a cuss word around my kid and now they picked it up in my bad. Like I should know, like I should have like known better.
right
Oopsies, I had to figure that out. No, you actively decided to work
mhm
and interact with this child in this way. That makes you doubly freaking like a piece accountable for all the things
mhm
that he ends up doing. And Cosmo, like you're saying, like ooh, haha, like this is you, but like you are the architect of your destruction because
yeah
you wanted this kid to think in this mindset, and then when it's done to you, you're just like, what else can you say? What can you do about it? This is what
mhm
you decided to do.
mhm
I hope you're not surprised.
right. Like, this is the bed that you made, and,
And you told him, like
yeah.
everyone's been telling him, because you're a born magician, you have the ability to be better than everyone else from the very beginning.
Mhm,
So
mhm,
inherently, you're telling him that he's better than you, and you're just like,
mhm.
that's not going to come back to blow
Yep.
me at any point.
Mhm.
I can't with people. Like please, like I think I'm like for me it's like please think through the consequences of your actions, like further than
Yeah,
just the initial consequence. Like go a couple steps
yeah.
further than the initial consequence. And I think that's what bothers me whenever I've been accused of being impulsive. I'm like, excuse me, I think before I act. I decide if the consequences are worth bearing or not. I'm like, well,
Mhm.
I'm gonna do this. I know probably this might happen, but you know what? And I'm fine with either one. Like that's whenever I do when I move. Like the idea that you're like, because especially like for these people, like for Moreau and Cosmo especially, they're outlining a strategy for magician kind for the foreseeable future.
Right.
So you have to think beyond just the
Mhm,
initial consequence. Like you have to.
mhm.
Where is their wall of threads? Like I don't think there is. Where are the spreadsheets? Like I don't think
Mhm. No, they are not thinking far enough, I
they're
don't
not
think.
doing any
But maybe I
projection.
don't know. But, that's why it's been 700 years. To Dylan's point, they ain't been really
You spent 700 years and you haven't picked up on patterns and predictability?
nah, for what?
And that's how you know that I, Porshèa Patterson, would never be anything this way. Where are spreadsheets? What are we doing? If I've been alive for 700 years, you better believe I have a system in place. There's no way. Absolutely not. I'm sorry. Um, so, while we go out on the disappointment with the world, generally, I want to thank everyone for listening and ask you to join us next week when we discuss chapters 7 through 9. If you are interested in joining us live, you should become a BNC baddie and join our live recordings on Sundays at 2 p.m. Pacific and at 5 p.m. Eastern Time.
Wizard Team is part of the Black Nerds Create Collective. If you want to keep up with us and our content, you can check out our website at blacknerdscreate.com, and then follow us on Instagram and Tumblr at Wizard Team Pod and at Black Nerds Create.